Mhm.
All right, we're recording. Here we are. I think we're hitting 50 episodes of just this, Richard Rohr, and we're going to be starting on page 71 of the book Training in Powerlessness. So we were just talking about powerlessness not too long ago. Well, actually, I guess it was 10 weeks ago now at church as we've been going through the 12 steps. So I think those of you who are 12 steppers will have that ringing in your head as we go through this little segment here. Before we dive into the text, anybody got some old business? Anything from last week? Anything from the week? Ah, Tony's raising his hand. Tony, go. What's going on, man?
Yes, can you, I know you bring it up all the time about the how versus the what. Um, and, one of the notes I put down is how do I show up for life? But can you just expand on that? Because I know you bring it up week after week after week, and it's just starting to hook in a little bit. How
Okay.
how do I apply the how instead of seeing God as the what?
Let me give you the little rant real quickly. Especially when I was landing back in evangelical Christianity, everybody was talking about God's will for their life, and praying to know God's will for their lives. And as they were talking about that, what I realized is what they imagined in God's will was a perfect plan for their life, that God had this perfect plan, and which included everything that they were supposed to do, who they were supposed to marry, all the little parts of their lives. And this was God's perfect plan. That was his will for their life, except that God wasn't telling, right? And so as I was trying to fit into this culture and figure out how I was supposed to do this, I was trying to figure out, okay, what is God's will for my life? What are all the what's? And I realized that really what we were looking for was a foolproof insurance plan. We have all the details so that we could just travel down the road of life, never have a misstep, never find ourselves in a ditch, and it would erase the uncertainty and all of you know, the disorientation and disturbances. But then as I started to think about that, it's like if God's will for our life is the most important thing that we can know as human beings, and God is not telling, then it's up to us to figure out what this perfect plan is and execute it perfectly, or our lives are always going to be less than God intended. And, obviously, I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. Why would God do that to us if his will is the most important thing? I finally got to my personal conclusion that God's will is not a what, but a how. In other words, God doesn't care what we do. We're free to choose whatever we choose in life. It's the how that sanctifies the what. So, how we do what we do is very important to God, not what we do. And with the right how, any what will do. So, whatever we choose in life are right in the center of God's will if we are living according to the how. So, what is the how? Well, the how of God is shouted from every page of Scripture. It's shouted through life. And so we know exactly what the how is. It is the how of living in unity, in connectedness, identifying with each other. In other words, love, but it's that kind of connection. So it's all the contemplative ideals that we are trying to establish in contemplative practice: presence, awareness, connectedness. All of those qualities are the how of God's will and the how of a life that's lived in kingdom. If you think about it, Jesus' kingdom is a how, it's not a what. We always think of it as a what. It's a territory, it's a place we go to, we enter or we exit. But it has nothing to do with that. It is a quality of how we approach life, how we perceive it, and how we live our relationships. And so that's what we're talking about. And I don't know if that's enough in terms of what you're looking at. How do we approach the how as opposed to the what? Well, once again, that's also contemplative practice. As we get better and better at stepping aside from that constant thought stream in our heads, because the thought stream, the egoic thought process is all about what?
Mm.
All about the details, right? It's all about the categorization. It's all about comparing and contrasting. It's all about, you know, planning and solving problems and gaining advantage. It's all of that whatness. But when we step aside from that, all we've got left is how. It's just the
Mm.
how of being. And so whereas we're practicing contemplative activities or practicing life in a contemplative way, then we're also practicing the how. And all the fear of life lies in the what's, right?
Mm,
So we're also stepping aside from the fear and into the how, which is love. So when we talk about perfect love casting out fear, it's that ability that we do have, although it's very difficult, to step out of the what's, out of the mind, out of the details, and into the timeless how that is connection and is love. So contemplative practice is taking us there.
I'm
But
going
it's
to jump
also
in
just a
here,
practice
Dave,
of
real quick.
living mindfully as well. And that's going to be taking us into the how. I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. I don't know whether my computer is having audio problems or you guys sense a little dropout in Dave's voice once in a while.
Yes.
Yeah, we're missing some parts of what you say.
Well, that's not good. I don't know what to say. Is it happening now?
No,
Okay.
it's random.
All right. Well, then we will continue. I'll do the best I can. If you miss something, anything really significant, just let me know. But everything looks fine from where I am right now.
Okay.
Mic is plugged in. Everything is good.
And you got
Okay,
your
how
baker's
versus
dozen.
what? Really important, because we will run around that maypole of trying to figure out the what of God's will till the cows come home, just like a dog chasing its tail, and we will never find it. It is the most frustrating thing in the world. And I've watched people really run their ships against the rocks, believing that they heard God's what and
mhm.
following that down, only to have it really blow up in their faces. So
Yeah,
think about that for yourself.
yeah, no, it totally makes sense, and I think it lines up with a little bit of what you talked about, the hazelnut, just focusing in on something
Yeah.
for a little bit. How do I do that? So,
Mhm.
yeah, it makes sense.
Cool. Okay. All right. Let's talk about training in powerlessness then. Page 71. He says any in-depth journey into prayer is definitely a training in powerlessness, in what you cannot do, which is why so many of us give up on it. If you're observing yourself, you will recognize that every feeling and every thought arises, reaches a crescendo, and then decrescendos. Seeing that, you can realize that it's all empty, as the Buddhists say. Why get so invested in a feeling that you won't even care about 3 hours from now? For some sad reason, the thoughts that seduce or attract you are mostly the negative ones, and neuroscience can now prove this. If something isn't as it should be, your little problem-solving mind takes off. I love that. If there's someone to blame or to negate, you go there. Pure praise and gratitude emerge much less frequently, and they are much harder to sustain over time. You hate and fear for days and weeks, and you are thankful for minutes. You must allow yourself to fall into a big love, and yet you cannot force this, which is why I like the word fall. It is more an allowing than a doing, more a being held than a holding on. If you doubt that you are powerless, try to not think a delicious negative thought by simple willpower. You must be held by something bigger and more attractive, or you will normally give up quickly. So, as I said, these two sections specifically are a lot more about the nuts and bolts, right? He's really getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of contemplative practice. Okay, having read that, any first reactions? Anything stand out? A lot of great lines here.
Well, for me, the third paragraph it says here, for some sad reason, the thoughts that seduce or attract you are mostly negative ones, and neuroscience can prove this. So I'm thinking too, does is that not human nature, and this is our kind of instinct, and we're programmed?
Oh,
Then does one,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, then does one try to resist this or try to go against human nature? Then I will always be frustrated because I cannot get into that place. Or if I do, maybe I don't know, 40 years from now?
Well, you are working against human nature, but it can be done. Because remember, human nature, again, the things we're talking about are all contained in the noggin, in the egoic noodle, shall we say. So once we step aside from that, then a lot of other things become possible. And when we start processing more and more of our day mindfully, we're going to be processing it outside of the normal thought processes. So that makes a huge difference as well. It changes things. So then we can step outside of our normal human nature and our way of perceiving and also our way of reacting. So everything starts to change, and it doesn't have to take 40 years. Yeah. It can come a lot quicker. It's like anything else. How many hours a day do you want to practice? That's really going to make the difference in how quickly you start to master something or get it to a place of repeatability. But you're right, Ellen. That's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to swim upstream against human nature.
Yeah, so this takes me to, and it gave me an idea because, I go to the other church who is more traditional evangelical. And so this man, I think he's in his 60s or 70s, and he's asking, the group or the leader, because his daughter is now saying, well, I think I'm gay or lesbian. And then now, of course, the community around her, the family is saying, well, that's wrong. That's, whatever they say. And so she is, you can tell from his account, she's suffering. And then she did tell her father, and her father told us in the class, she's like, why is this wrong? God made me this way. So meaning that is her nature, which now brings me here. Why are we resisting what is God made us this way? Then
Okay,
she,
I'm not sure I'm following you, Ellen. Are you equating her sexual identity to the nature that we're talking about here?
yes,
Okay, well,
because
no,
that's
no, 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 no. Has
no.
nothing to do with that. What we're talking about is our natural tendency to focus on negative thoughts, to focus on thoughts themselves, to get wrapped up as if those thoughts are reality when they are just the workings of our mind. When we identify with that egoic process, then we are inside that bubble and we're not perceiving reality as it is. But that has nothing to do with how you're born in terms of your sexual identity. You can be a gay contemplative or a straight contemplative, trans contemplative, right? Are you making the distinction there? I hope.
I don't. No, I don't know. I mean, yeah, contemplation. This is our resisting our negative thoughts. Yes, it's a
No, no,
different.
it's not that either. It's not resisting our negative thoughts. Let's read through this and see
Okay.
if during the process this comes a little bit clearer to you. Okay. Okay, starting back at the top. Any in-depth journey into prayer is definitely a training in powerlessness, in what you cannot do, which is why so many of us give up on it. Um, that's huge. All right. Contemplation is the opposite of the way that we go about mastering or obtaining pretty much anything else in life. Not in everything, but many things. Because it's often called the apophatic way, which is a big word for me, or via negativa, which probably makes more sense to us. That it's the negative way. It's the way of apophatic way. It's the way of nothingness. It's a allowing as opposed to an acquiring, as we've talked about before, and he talks about in this passage as well. It is a subtraction and not an addition. It is an acknowledgement of powerlessness, that we are allowing something to happen, but we're not making it happen. That doesn't mean that there's not anything to do, as we've said so many times. But what we are doing is subtracting the things that block us from the ability to be present and connected enough that God can do the work in us. And so we are allowing and getting out of the way. And that is hugely difficult to do. Because first of all, what are you doing? You're acknowledging that you're not in control. And the mind is all about control, trying to control the situation, you know, kind of getting back to what Ellen was talking about, the reason that the mind is the way it is that it's going to react to unfavorable circumstances so that we can survive them. The mind is a survival mechanism. And so it's going to focus on and react to negative circumstances. It's not going to focus on the positive ones or the advantageous ones because they're already advantageous, right? It's going to focus on what needs to be fixed, what needs to be overcome. And it's going to be constantly looking for that. It's going to be constantly scanning the horizon for any threat. That is the way that we survive. We have a squirrel, Marion puts out nuts for the squirrel, and the squirrel comes, and the birds come to eat the seeds, and they are constantly looking every time. If they are in a lower position, the birds on the ground, man, they're constantly looking everywhere. They're skittish. They react to any sound, and the squirrel the same way. Darts down, picks up the seed, and immediately is looking around the horizon again because they're constantly looking for threats. They're in a vulnerable position, and they know it when they're feeding. And so they have to keep watching. And that's what our mind is doing. It's like a squirrel, it's like a bird on the ground, constantly looking for something that could be a threat. That's what we're working against when we're working against our mind because it's all fear-based. And of course, in life, physical life, there's a certain amount of uncertainty and fear, right? But what we're trying to do is balance that as we step away from that whole apparatus into just the connection of God's love. And that balance is what is going to give us an ability to even deal with the threats of life in a different way. And so that's what we're trying to do. But in order to do that, we have to let go of the control. And that is terrifying, especially when you're first starting. And so any in-depth journey into prayer is a training in powerlessness, what you can't do, which is why so many of us give up on it. That's the narrow way and the constricted gate that Jesus is talking about. The way to life is narrow. The gate is constricted. Few people go that way. Most of them are taking the broad path. But that broad path is the path of fear. He's not talking about heaven and hell. He's talking about right here and right now. And this ability to move into the how and not be stuck in the what. Is that making sense?
It's interesting too. I think, how we tend to, even when it's maybe, at first looking toward the problem to resolve it in order to be advantageous was more for survival. But then we've kind of evolved into this place where we continue to allow it to crescendo and revisit that negative thought over and over. And we build these neuronal networks and then we revisit it even more because that's the natural path that our mind is taking. And it seems to be it's like this need for control, even though the problem is solved, even when the tiger isn't in front of us and we have no threat, we're still revisiting that fear or that anxiety or that need for fight or flight. It seems that that is like very likely based in our need for control rather than just letting it go.
Absolutely. If you analyze your typical day and how much anxiety you feel, how much stress you feel, and then you analyze how much of that is based in any clear and present danger at the time, and how much of it, as Sarah is saying, is just in your mind. It's either residual or it's anticipatory, but it doesn't have anything to do with right here and right now. Most of our lives physically here in South County or wherever we are is pretty physically safe, relatively. We have threats from now and again, but most of our anxiety is just in the mind. Step outside that, you step outside the fear. But in order to do that, you have to acknowledge your powerlessness because you have to move outside of your sense of control. That's the rub. That's the difficulty. And admitting powerless is really alien to us in the West, especially. You know, the West is always, especially here in America, we're all about the rugged individual, right? We admire Batman, who goes on it on his own and stays separate from the rest of humanity as he tries to save it, but he's never really a part of it, you know. And so we admire that. But imagine what it would really be like to be Batman and how isolating and how lonely it would be. Never able to show your face, never able to show anybody who you really are. Um, that's a metaphor, really, for the way we live our lives egoically. We're always wearing a mask. We never let people see who we are. We never really let down our guard. And even the things that we try to do that we consider virtuous, we're still doing more or less in isolation if we haven't learned to balance.
So Dave, would it be true or close to true that then how I respond, or how, if I'm in the mode of love, the outcomes may be exactly the same if I'm in a mode of love or fear, but how I emerge after that event takes place, I'm in a better position on the side of love, is what Richard Rohr is saying here. Does that fit?
Yeah, let's put it this way. You know, as you go through life and as you're working hard, from a distance, it may look exactly the same whether you're operating egoically or whether you're operating contemplatively. But the
Yes.
closer you get to the person, the more you can tell the difference. You know,
Mm.
we don't really hide that well from the people that are really closest to us. You know, the ones whose toothbrush is hanging next to ours is the one who's really going to see everything, and they're going to know the difference. But even in sometimes in transition, you can still be working really hard and doing the things that you do, but you know the difference inside. You
Mhm.
have come to the point where you realize, okay, that the tail is no longer wagging the dog, and it takes a while to become more apparent to others. And yes, and you're right, Tony, all of this process that we go through has nothing to do with outcome. We don't have control over the outcome, but we do have control over how we engage the process and whether we engage the process. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to engage the process because the process is always now, you know. Outcome is future. We don't have any control over that. And so it's just engaging the now, the process of now. And the more we can do it in a balanced way, the more we're going to be able to be love-based instead of fear-based, which allows us to be present and to allow us to accept our powerlessness and be vulnerable and all those things we talk about.
Dave,
Yeah.
is it like when our children are grown and we need to give them to the Lord? And it's hard because we know we're powerless after they grow up. And like I have to give my daughters to the Lord. And it's hard. I mean, I'm powerless. Like before when they were home, I could be there for them. And now, like I pray for them all the time, but it's hard because they're women now. Is that is and then I give them to the Lord and then I'm more at peace. But if I try to stay in worrying about them, that's when it's my ego. Like, oh, Carol, you can fix this and you can do this for them, and their husbands. And when I'm powerless, I surrender more to the Lord. And the Lord goes, Carol, I'm taking care of them. Look how wonderful they are. And look at how they're in their 30s now. And I took care of them all those years. And you're powerless now, Carol. You are. So give them to me. Are you going to give them to me? Is that part of it, Pastor?
It's exactly like that. Exactly like that. I mean, that's it. That's the feeling. And that's, see, it's all fear-based, right, Carol?
Yes,
You're still worried. You're still fearful that something bad
yes,
is going to happen, and somehow you got to be there, and you got to try to control it. And even though
right,
there's nothing you can do from a distance, I mean, some of them are in Colorado, right? So
right,
now you're projecting to Colorado all these things,
exactly.
and constantly running it over and over in your head. That's what our minds do. That's what they're designed to do. They're actually operating exactly as they're designed.
Hmm.
They're doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay,
But if we
okay.
identify with that, then we are always going to be in that state, like the squirrel on the ground, looking around for the predator, and we can never just be. So those moments where you really do give it over and you feel that at least temporary peace, that's the balance we're looking for. Hey, we're going to worry about our kids. Are we ever really going to stop worrying about our kids? No, I don't think so. But we can start to balance it. We can actually take vacations from our worry and from our concern. And that's the balance that we're looking for. And then as you get more and more further forward, you know, it starts moving the other direction, and you really have more and more of a sense of peace. But it's a balance, and we're always as humans going to oscillate. You know, it's not a steady state one side or another. We're going to be flowing back and forth. That's what we do as humans. But we need the balance. And so you hit the first part already, to become aware of what it is you're doing, so that when you start doing it again, at least you can say, okay, I know what this is. This is where I need to back off, say my prayer, do what I do to bring myself back to center again, back to present. But it feels exactly like that, even if there's no kids in the picture. All right, so second paragraph. If you're observing yourself, you will recognize that every feeling and every thought arises, reaches a crescendo, and then decrescendos. See, here's the thing that sometimes we think we're supposed to be achieving in centering prayer, meditation, contemplative practice, is that our mind is supposed to be completely empty. You know, it doesn't really work that way. We're always aware of the activities of our mind. We're aware of the sensory input, things that are coming in through the senses. We're aware of that stuff, but we're not focusing on it. We're not following it. We're just aware of it. And those thoughts will rise, like Carol with her thoughts of her daughter. You know, you'll become aware of it. It'll rise, it'll reach a crescendo, a climax, and then it'll start to go back down again. If you don't jump on and give it more oxygen. If you just dispassionately watch it, it's going to have its own little curve, and then it's going to float on down the river. And then the next one will come, and you watch that curve. And the one after that, you watch that curve. You are still apart from that. It's when you grab onto it, and now the emotion follows it, and now you're off to the races again. What we want to do is be aware, but it's a choiceless awareness. We choose not to get on that particular ride and follow it along. But that's what happens. You're kind of watching all this take place. The thoughts come, they rise, and then they come down the other side. Sometimes, when you're really trying to do centering prayer or meditation, you'll get an itch, a little tick on your face or and you're going to want to scratch it. But it's interesting if you just stop, just sit there, and just notice it. It'll be there, it'll rise, and it'll fall down the other side and go away all by itself. You know, if you just wait it out. And that's the practice of it. So it's not that we're resisting, as you were saying, Ellen, we're not resisting negative thoughts. That's giving them more energy. We're just not jumping on board. We're just watching them go by with this shape to them. Because if we resist them, now we're giving it more energy again. It's those two wolves, right? Which one wins? The one I feed? Don't feed it. Don't give it any oxygen. Cut off the blood supply by just being. And then seeing that, he says, seeing that shape of those thoughts as they move by, seeing that, you can realize that it's all empty, as the Buddhists say. Not empty in terms of being completely silent, but empty of any value to you at that moment. It just doesn't have any value. It's just a thought. It's what your mind has conjured up at that moment. And then he says, why get so invested in a feeling that you won't even care about 3 hours from now, right? It's going to be transitory. Right now, it seems so real. Right now, it seems so important. as you jump onto it. But it's transitory if you just let it take its shape. And then the paragraph that Ellen was talking about, for some sad reason, the thoughts that seduce or attract are mostly negative ones, and neuroscience can now prove this. But we've talked about this, why is it that they're negative? Because those are the ones that the mind is concerned with. We are concerned with whatever threatens us. We're concerned with whatever puts us at a disadvantage. Those are the things we need to work on. The stuff that's all right, it's done, it's good. We don't have to think about that, right? What we stress over, what we're anxious over, what we are concerned with are those things that are negative. That's what we fixate on. And that's a survival technique. But that's what we're trying to work on. So if you really let your mind play, with you, if you're always mind wandering throughout the day, then all of that time, or most of that time that you're spending not thinking about what you're actually doing, is going to be spent in negative thoughts. And of course, that's going to define your day. It's going to be a bad day. But the day had nothing to do with it. It was what you were swimming in as you went through your day that made all the difference. So if something isn't as it should be, your little problem-solving mind takes off. If there's someone to blame or to negate, you go there. Pure praise and gratitude emerge much less frequently, and they're much harder to sustain over time. You hate and fear for days and weeks, and you're thankful for only minutes. For those of you who are with us on Sunday, the name of the message was Grateful and Amazed. And what I was trying to get through is that kingdom is the state of being grateful and amazed. Abraham Heschel saying that his greatest talent was his ability to be surprised, that we can still be surprised and delighted and amazed by the smallest details of our day, the most mundane and insignificant ones, that we're still surprisable, that we can feel that feeling. To be in a state of gratitude, to be in a state of amazement, the magical nature of things, the miraculous nature of the smallest things, that is kingdom. That is that pure presence that we're talking about. That is the awareness of all these gifts that we've been given that we can't give ourselves. That is the opposite of the state that our minds will normally put us in, which is always going to be fear-based, and either trying to bring something in or take something out in order for the moment to be what we want it to be. But to be grateful and amazed, you don't want to change a thing. The moment is just enough. So continuing on, you must allow yourself to fall into a big love, and yet you cannot force this, which is why I like the word fall. So that big love in caps there, that's the perfect love of God. That is really the default position of the universe, the default position of our lives. The ground of all being is that big love, is that connection of God, the oneness of God. But we can't try to force it. We can't make it happen. This is, again, that process of allowing, not accomplishing, of getting out of the way of all the what's in our mind so that how of the big love can play through. It feels really different. It's more an allowing than a doing, more a being held than holding on. And therefore, since it's allowing and not doing, then we're never going to have a sense of entitlement. We talked about this Sunday in the sense of salvation, equating salvation with recovery, salvation with spiritual liberation right here and right now, salvation with the transformation that the New Testament talks about. All those, it's really all the same thing, right? And so we talked about is salvation, is this transformation, this recovery we're talking about, is it a gift or is it work? And we read from Ephesians and Philippians where Paul says, first of all, it's a gift so that no one can boast, right? And then he talks about working out your salvation in fear and trembling. And so Is he schizo? What's going on here? What is it? Is it a gift or is it a work? And we talked about the fact that, yes, it is a gift. There's work to do, but the work is getting out of the way so that the gift is allowed to be received. Right? So we're hitting it kind of indirectly, I suppose, if you want to think of it that way. We're not directly grabbing the gift and making it ours, because as soon as we do that, we've earned it. And once we've earned something, we're entitled to it. And that changes all the calculus. If you're entitled, you're not grateful. If you're entitled, you're not surprised. You're not amazed. It's a completely different frame of reference, completely different perspective. And so we want to make sure that we're approaching this in such a way that we realize, yeah, it's a gift, but there's still work to do. If you doubt that you are powerless, try not to think a delicious negative thought by simple willpower. Have you ever tried to do that? Anybody? Have you ever had a song in your head that you just
Mm,
can't stop playing and you try to make it go away? How's that working out for you?
mhm.
Where you resist, persist, that is for sure.
Can you think of times like that? You had a persistent thought, maybe at 2:30 in the morning, staring at the dark in the ceiling and trying to go to sleep, and you try to make it go away, try to wish it into the cornfield and push it off. How's that working out for you?
Mhm.
Just gets bigger and louder and
Mhm.
loops faster in your mind.
There you go. Because you are using the same apparatus that created the thought to try to make it go away. Do you see? There's
Mhm.
Einstein's quote again. You can't solve a problem using the same type of consciousness that you used to create the problem. You're
Mhm.
using the same apparatus to try to banish what it created, and that just will not work. Jesus says it this way. He says, like breeds like, right? He says, you're not going to get figs from thorn bushes. Like breeds like. And so one of the fallacies of the church was to try to use fear to terrify people into the arms of a loving God. That doesn't work. Fear breeds fear, never love.
Mhm.
Love breeds love. And so at some point, you got to take that leap into love, which again is an admission of powerlessness, to let go of the control and just let yourself again fall into that big love. But there has to be that moment where you actually let go. Because if you try to control your way, you'll never ever get there. It's like going half the distance and half the distance and half the distance. When do you arrive? Never. We can't do it under that power, under
Mhm.
that kind of vehicle. That's why the admission of powerless is everything.
Yes, I'm imagining it like, you're standing on the edge somewhere, on the edge of a stage, and you have all these people down on the ground, and you're just going to surrender and hope they catch you. But in this case, it's having God, knowing, like, having that faith. Okay, God, I know you're going to catch me.
What do you call it?
Right?
Crowd surfing? Is that what you're talking about? Crowd surfing, right?
Yeah, the crowd
Yeah.
surfing.
Boom.
Yeah, you just close your eyes and hope that they don't drop you on the floor, right? But that's what that feels like. But it's interesting to me. He calls this training in powerlessness, and it really is a good step for me. And I think it really ties in what you said earlier about the what and the how. I see I see in this negative thoughts. It's like fear begets fear, and then love begets love. The way to do that is to get out of that what thinking and get into the how, and
Mhm.
and then falling into God's arms at the same time. And yeah, this is really good. It seems like the book's now getting into giving me more tools to try to practice this.
Another way that we often put it, is that the means we use must match the ends we seek, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the means we use are always going to produce ends that match. In other words, like breeds like. So we're not going to get to love through fear. At some point, we're going to have to practice the connection, the identification, the oneness of love if we want to get there. We're not going to get to unity through division. At some point, we have to start practicing connection in order to get connection. And I know that sounds a bit like a catch-22, but once you let go of the need for control, once you admit powerlessness, that's the difference. Then it becomes possible. Then you break through the catch-22. You guys are so quiet tonight. That must mean you're really thinking.
The
His
love is
last
just
line here,
flowing
you
in.
must go ahead, Tony.
I said the love is just flowing in. Bring
So
on the love.
his last line here, if you doubt that you are powerless, try not to think a delicious negative thought by simple willpower. You must be held by something bigger and more attractive, or you will normally give up quickly. So what is he basically saying there? And this is the crux of contemplative practice. I mean, what we do is we don't try to resist what we don't want. We immerse in and engage in something bigger, that expansion, that space. So we must be held by something bigger and more attractive. Paul says it that you focus on what is good. You don't focus on all the negative stuff, the stuff we don't want. You focus on God. You focus on what is good. And in that, you displace the things that you don't want. The same thing in contemplative practice centering prayer. We're going to focus on the presence. We're going to engage there. That will displace the things we don't want. We don't try to resist them. That's only going to make them bigger. So it's a very different feeling than you normally would think. It's really a letting go. That's why I love the skydiving metaphor, because it is so much that. When you jump out of that plane, yeah, you're letting everything go. Complete surrender to gravity. Yeah, you got the backpack on your back. But in the moment, it feels like a complete letting go. And that's the way it feels. You're free falling. Very different feeling.
I want to go back to what Carol said about, worrying about our daughters. I have my two daughters. For some reason, I'm not worried about them. And I think it's because of the fact that when they were younger, I taught them these, I influenced them, that, felt like I had power over them. But I think it's because of anecdotal things that has happened that gave me confidence. I'm glad they're equipped with some good judgment and also surrounded by friends who are helpful, will help each other. So one was one daughter who is, this is now boyfriend number 2, right? And I said, why did you and Diego break up? And this is when they were going to college. And he said, no, because Diego said, why are you not staying at Cal State Fullerton? I am. You stay here. And she chose to go to San Luis Obispo. And she said, no, I don't want a person to tell me where I'm going. So I said, oh my gosh, this girl, as a 17-year-old, is wiser than I was when I was 17. So those little things gave me confidence that, this is the same girl that had boyfriend number 3, who is poor Zach with the codependency. And she was able to figure out this is unhealthy, and she had to deal with the consequences of that. So I have more confidence. And then the younger one, who chose to be in San Jose, she's surrounded by friends because every now and then she'll come for the weekend, but friend one and friend two are here with her, and they stay over in my place. They couch surf, but to have met them gave me confidence that they have good judgment and I can let them be. And I have to trust the system. The university system have their safety, their security, or whatever it is. And that's all I can do. That I have to say, I don't know if has to do with wanting control or power too, in that saying, okay, I've taught them. See, I taught them. And now they're equipped with this. Is that also like saying, oh, see how powerful I was? I don't feel it's powerful, but I'm feeling like I'm glad they listened to what I said, and by not only by words but by example. Yeah,
Okay,
is that
that's good.
feeling powerful too? I don't know, because now I'm able to say, okay, you know what you Carol says. I leave it to God. Well, yes, I leave it to their judgment. Maybe in a way you can say I leave it to God. You take care of them. They're equipped with these skills.
That's great. Just be prepared. The first time they have a car accident up there or something, then it all starts all over again, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the way
afraid
this
of that.
works, right? We
Yes.
establish all our ground rules, we establish the walls
Yeah.
of our place, and then they get blown out, and then we have to start all over again. So, but for right now, you're in a sweet spot. Hang on to it, as long as you're
Yeah.
sure.
I guess so. You just put that
Yeah.
earworm in there.
Enjoy
Ah,
your sweet spot. Don't listen to him.
don't listen to me. No. Hey, you
Yeah,
know what
don't listen to him, Ellen.
I think what we can do is we can actually finish this section because I think we've talked through enough of this that this last section is going to should make sense. So let's just read it and we're actually done with the whole section. Isn't that cool? Letting go of the junk. People often ask me, how long should I pray each day? I usually answer, as long as it takes to get rid of the junk. That's how it feels to me, at least in my own attempts at prayer. By junk, I mean the thoughts that obsess us almost as soon as we wake up. Was the last day okay? Did anything go wrong? Did I accomplish my goals? Then we reassure ourselves. Oh, yes, it was productive. I did this, I did that. Then we scan for what's coming up today. Oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. That'll be fun. I hate this. Overly strong expectations are invariably disappointments and resentments waiting to happen. Try not to do that too much. When we rest in prayer, we learn to let go of these habitual patterns. We move from defining ourselves by our doing or not doing and move to the simplicity of naked being. We are human beings before we are human doings. In prayer, we sit in our emptiness, doing something at which we cannot succeed, and let God's faithfulness be our only success. Staying with anything long term and even continuing to fail at it is always giving God more chances to love us unconditionally. God has always allowed me to do everything wrong so God could do everything right for me, really. So he's putting kind of a period on the end of this thought process in this section, you know. And I like that. How long should I pray each day? As long as as long as it takes to get rid of the junk. So what does that mean? I mean, as long as it takes for you to get into at least a moment of that choiceless awareness, a moment where you're simply observing, you're watching the thoughts come in and crescendo and then taper off again, or the itch come up, crescendo, taper off again. You're able to just sit and watch things pass through. You're not grabbing on, you're not glomming on, you're not feeling the emotional roller coaster. You just have that moment, you know, even if it is a moment. Well, hopefully each prayer session allows us to get there. Sometimes you're not going to be able to get there. It's just not going to work, you know. But that's the goal, to see if we can get to that place where we are just being, right? So how long should your prayer last? Ideally, until you can at least get to that point. And then he has this really you know, pretty descriptive, scenario of how our minds work, starting with the past, moving to the future, worrying about the present, what we do constantly, the way it turns. But to get past that into that place of choiceless awareness, that's what the prayer is all about. And to be able to sit in that place that he's calling emptiness, but it's not empty really, but it feels like you're emptied out. And this is interesting, doing something at which we cannot succeed. So in terms of us actually succeeding, trying to make this happen, it's not any more possible than you trying not to think that negative thought that is continuing to spin in your head. The more you try, the more you fail at it because you're giving it more. But the way we succeed is to back off, let go, and let presence displace the rest. That's the God's faithfulness that is our success. So this is the stark difference between contemplative practice and just about anything else we do in life. Often in the creative arts, you're going to have an analogy there that if you're involved in art, I mean, Sharon can tell us about this. You know, if you're involved in music or involved in something that takes you into that flow, you know, yes, you had to do all the work to hone your craft so that you had those techniques, those methods under your fingertips. But to really be the artist is to let go of the process and just flow with it. And all of that's in muscle memory. We're trying to do the same thing in our spiritual practice. We do the work to learn the techniques of how we step aside from this physical process that we call our minds, but we do it by surrendering to the flow. Sports would be the same kind of thing. Surfers talk about it all the time, you know, how they get out there and it's a different kind of experience. So if you feel like you are grinding it out, if you feel like you're really trying to make it happen, then you're still under the old way of processing. You'll know when you break through into the flow.
This goes so much hand in hand with the gratitude too. You know, this moment is enough. We are enough.
Mhm.
Our contemplative prayer is enough. We can't try to think contemplatively. That's our ego. That definitely makes sense.
Have any in the last couple of minutes that we have here, have any of you felt what I'm trying to describe? Have you felt that breakthrough into just the presence?
Sporadic.
Yeah. I hope that you have. Yeah. I don't know if any of you remember the Disney ride, the Pirates of the Caribbean. Have you ever been on that?
Yeah.
I always remember that ride. Remember you start off in the kind of the bayou and you're in the boat and the boat's in the water, but the boat's on a track, right? And you feel the track as you're going through and it's guiding you along the way. And then you have to go up this thing and the something catches on the bottom of the boat and you feel the traction of it and you feel the vibration of it as it's pulling the boat along. And then at a certain point, it drops you back into deep water and you just feel the boat just go and just kind of float in the water. That's kind of the feeling that I have when I'm under my own power, my own mind. It's like I can feel the vibration. I can feel the boat being pulled along by the chain. And then it releases and you're just bobbing in the water. And it feels that kind of feeling of openness and freedom or expansion. It kind of is like that. And so in your contemplative prayer sits or even through your day as you're just trying to go through the day mindfully, you know, see if you can feel the vibration release and then you're just bobbing for a while. And then of course it'll catch again and you'll be being dragged along by the chain again. And then as soon as you realize that, bob back in the water. It's always going to be that kind of oscillation going back and forth. But the more awareness that we have, the more as soon as we realize we're doing it again, we're really grabbing on, you know, then we can do our technique, what we have learned to do to be able to come back into the moment.
Yeah, I relate with Sarah on her, but sporadic. You know, it's that roller coaster ride because you're in between this aha moment and reality where I'm gonna like cut that driver off on the freeway, right? And get right back.
Let's
So
be
there's that balance in there.
present.
Don't go there, William. Don't go there.
It feels good to let go, though. It is like it is so apparent when you are in that moment. It's just so clear. I mean, whether it's a thought or whether it's an emotion that you're holding on to, or an idea or a concept or a person or an object. I mean, once you let go, it's healing and it just consumes. I can just feel it in my entire body and being. It's just, you're there.
Yeah.
And
I,
isn't it the most ironic thing that the feeling that we're talking about is the most liberating and most connective and beautiful feeling in the world, and yet we're terrified to let go, to have that feeling. Because as long as we're hanging on, we think that's our source of survival, But as soon as we let go, we find, but then next moment we're back hanging on to the rope again. It's such a paradox in terms of our human nature, because the fear is so deep of being out of control, being powerless. But being powerless and acknowledging it and flowing with it is the best feeling we'll ever have. That's why we like falling in love, right? Because it's out of control, but it's also terrifying. So,
The more we let go, the more it lingers. The more we try to claw at it and hold on, the more it slips out of our grasp.
yeah. Hey, we finished section 2. We should be proud of ourselves.
yeah.
So we'll start with section 3 next week, which is oh, lovely, suffering and surrender. You guys are going to enjoy that.
I might miss next week.
Uh, great love and great suffering. Those are the two ways that we come to this. So, all right. Any last minute short thoughts? Okay. Then let's turn it over to Scotty.
Lord, thank you for this time with each other and with you. And may we find in our coming days and weeks and months and years as we live out our life, time to let things go, the trust to let things go, and have the experience of what it's like to not be distracted, to be able to calm our minds and our bodies and our spirits and our being, and just find that peace that surpasses all understanding. We can look for it, we can hunt for it, we can read books on it, we can go to school for it. But until we turn our lives over to you in a way that most of us haven't imagined, we have troubles finding that peace. So I pray that we're able to take what we perceive as the challenges that keep us distracted and lay them at your feet, Lord, and find that place of peace and surrender and calmness and pure love. We love you, Lord. Thank you for loving us. It's in your holy and precious name, Lord Jesus, that we pray and we give our thanks and we say amen. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. We
Yeah.
will see you Sunday.
See you, boys and girls.
Bye.
Bye, Scott.
Dave,
Good
Dave,
night.
before you go,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie, because I'm doing Course in Miracles with Lorendi. And so I'm trying to tie in both of these two books, to see, do they jive? Are they similar? His writing is, of course, a lot easier to read than Course in Miracles. But so part of me while we were doing this is I was going back and, rereading some stuff that Course in Miracles says. So I don't know. I guess it'll have to be a separate conversation where,
Well, just really
um,
quick, just really quickly. I haven't done an extensive research of Course in Miracles, but I've read at least the first part of the book, and I've read about it. Here is my not a problem with the Course in Miracles, because you're going to find a lot of overlap in the
yeah,
teachings there, in the kind of way that we're approaching spirituality here. It has to do with intention and intent. The Course in Miracles, even by its title, a lot is geared toward how do you manifest and realize the things that you want in life? How do you make that happen? By harnessing the power of the
right,
universe and how harnessing spiritual power. But if we are
right,
using this for intentionally for our own advantage, then automatically we are entering back into an egoic process. What we're
right.
talking about with contemplation and with Jesus' way is a complete letting go.
Hmm.
You are willing to be last in order to be first. You're going to lose yourself and lose your life in order to find it. We are not geared toward any agenda. We're not geared toward any specific outcome. And what I find in some of these other processes, like Course in Miracle or The Secret, that,
Uh-huh.
that came out for a while, it was all about manifesting and becoming powerful in a more spiritual way by becoming more enlightened. That's a very Gnostic sort of way of approaching, but it is antithetical if that's what's going on in Course in Miracles. And like I said, I can't say for certain. It was just my impression of it
Right.
as far as I went. But this is something that is fundamentally different about the two processes. And as you go further into Course in Miracles, you can keep that in mind as you go through and see if that's there. Because what we're trying to do
Okay.
is really let go.
Let me
Let
read
go of
just
agenda.
one little thing to you. In electing perception instead of knowledge, you have placed yourself in a position of where you could resemble your father only by perceiving miraculously. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Creation is your source and your only real function. I can relate that to, back to Richard. I mean, if I remember and stay in that place of I am God's creation. And we've been talking a lot about, I mean, we're just getting started, but we've been talking a lot about that we are God's creation and that we are the miracle. And he does talk about the ego versus, our own letting go and powerlessness. And he uses different words, but, we have talked about that. So, yeah, I just wanted your feedback on it as I go through this. Um, and try to jive, I guess is the right word, the two together. So take
Mhm.
what I like from this, and then, of course, take what I like from this and put the two together. That works for me. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Once again, it comes down to intent. Because if
Okay.
your intent is to try to create favorable circumstances for yourself or to
Uh-huh.
achieve a certain outcome that you're looking for, then automatically, by definition, you're living in the future again
Right.
and you're
Right.
no longer present. And the
Right.
only way that we really get present is when we lose ourselves. We don't
Right.
focus more on ourselves or the advantage or the outcome we're going for. It's the exact opposite of that. And
Okay.
ironically, the best way that we will achieve positive outcomes is when we are living in this present.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we don't work hard, and it doesn't mean we don't work for our outcomes. It's
Right.
just that that isn't the focus. The focus is engaging the process and living that to the fullest in full
Right.
presence, and then allowing the outcome to unfold, even as we work toward it.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just different. But just yeah, I'd say mostly just watch where the intention is,
Okay.
and that
Yeah,
should
it's
make a
it's
difference.
more a better understanding of Jesus, really. I mean, it's a to better, I think so far to better understand um, Jesus and his sayings and scripture comes up. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I'll be curious to see how it goes. But
Well, let
Lorinda,
us know as you
I
get
mean,
into it deeper.
Lorinda is so good at, and so is Mark. Mark led yesterday and tied in the fifth way. You know, we were talking and he brought in your fifth way. So anyway, all right, thanks. I wanted to thank
Something
you all for staying with me.
No, can I add something really, really quick? And I know this is a wonderful discussion. It's for another day. But Jerry, when you said it's the perception. Sometimes I would have days or mornings where my patients are so difficult, and I go, oh my gosh. And then I have to remind myself, I chose this as my job and career. Remind me again, I am your hands and feet. That way, it's not as difficult to go through.
Right.
And there's no perfection about it. Okay, so I get it. This is the best I can do. And it's the same too with my daughters, with the relationship. If it's ornery, I said, oh my gosh, I'm doing this because I love them. And that makes a whole difference in that perception, which reminded me of another, it was a short article about a janitor for the school cleaning the toilets. And then he had to flip his mind and say, I am doing this. It's not picking up the trash. And I'm doing this so that the students, the staff, and teachers can have a clean bathroom each time. And that made a whole different perception and made it easier to do what we're doing.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Great.
Thanks, Ellen.
All right. So for anyone who's watching the recording, this was a little bonus session that you
Yeah.
get for free. How about that?
Free. You get this for free.
All right. Okay,
All right.
everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night,
Good
Jordana.
Good night.
Good night, Jerry.
Sunday.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.